This week in the news, EA lays off staff, Valve is sued again, new age ratings are introduced, and more on this week's Old Man Rages at the News. If you like the content, hit the like and subscribe buttons, and let's get on with the show. And we're kicking off this week with EA laying off staff across all Battlefield studios, even though Battlefield 6 had a record-breaking launch. To IGN's understanding, the numbers are unknown and it's part of realignment across the Battlefield studios. IGN also asked EA for the total number and roles impacted, and a EA spokesperson told them, "We've made select changes within our Battlefield organization to better align our teams around what matters most to our community. Battlefield remains one of our biggest priorities, and we're continuing to invest in the franchise, guided by player feedback and insights from Battlefield leads." You know, the classic answering a question without answering it. IGN also mentions here that Battlefield 6 is struggling because fans have been criticizing the game's updates due to heavy monetization. I know, classic EA. Generative AI usage for in-game cosmetics, and fewer content updates than expected. This resulted in the game going from mostly positive to negative. This is also reflected in the Steam charts, with them losing around 90% of the players they had at launch. Now, to be fair, I didn't do the math. I'm just doing some eyeball estimating here. But regardless, the loss is quite big. In other news, Valve is yet again in legal trouble. This time they're facing a lawsuit in the UK over music rights in games Valve doesn't make or own. Yeah, to a layman, that sounds absurd. I know, and I'll emphasize this, I'm not a lawyer. And for the love of God, this ain't legal advice. Hell, I have no legal background to speak of. I'm just covering what's happening in the industry. Now that that's out of the way, the UK-based collective rights management organization, PRS for music, has quote-unquote commenced legal proceedings against Valve over the use of music in PC games sold and distributed via Steam. PRS claims that Valve never obtained a license for its use of the rights managed by PRS on behalf of its members, compromising songwriters, composers, and music publishers, since Steam was established. The reason this is a problem is because in the UK, licensing music for video games is a separate element of the copyright to what occurs when the game is subsequently downloaded or streamed by a player. The PRC website documentation indicates that storefronts like Xbox use the game, quote, general entertainment online license that covers non-broadcast streamers like Prime Video, Disney, and Netflix, and notes previous deals with Sony for the use of copyrighted music within games and games-related content downloaded across Europe. Mind you, this is also the same group that in 2009 decided to pounce on a woman who played classic radio to her horse to keep it calm without paying for public performance license. In my honest opinion, these guys are nuts, and this whole thing feels petty. Now, another thing that also feels petty, Valve also made a public statement about the New York's Attorney General's lawsuit. Now, this is a huge wall of text, and when it comes to everything legal, this ain't a place to look for legal advice, as I mentioned earlier. Now, what I will cover is this. Quote Valve directly, the New York Attorney General also proposed to gather additional information beyond what we normally collect in the course of processing payments about each game user on the off chance someone in New York was anonymizing their location to appear outside of New York, such as by using a VPN. This would have involved implementing invasive technologies for every user worldwide. Simultaneously, the New York Attorney General demanded that Valve collect more personal data about our users to do additional age verification, even though most payment methods used by New York Steam users already have age verification built in. Valve knows our users care about the security of their personal information, and we believe it's in our and their interests to only collect the information necessary to operate the business and company within law. So yes, the New York Attorney General wanted Valve to collect more information so we can, basically be even more vulnerable to data breaches and identity theft. Fucking great move, am I right? Now, not only that, but to quote Valve one more time, the type of comments the New York Attorney General demands from Valve went far and beyond what existing New York law requires, and even beyond New York itself. It may have been easier and cheaper for Valve to make a deal with the New York Attorney General, but we believed that the type of deal that would satisfy the New York Attorney General would have been bad for users and other game developers and impacted our ability to innovate in game design. And from what I gather on this issue is that the New York Attorney General is reaching because of, quote, reasons. I'm at least glad that Valve keeps gamers in mind when it comes to this lawsuit. The reason why I say that keeps gamers in mind is because, let's be real, the New York Attorney General proposed to remove the ability to transfer digital items from Valve games, but Valve refused to do so. Ergo, you got a cosmetic that your friend wants, and you don't really want or need or plan on using, and you can give that to your friend. If the Attorney General has her way, well, guess what? Both you and your friend are stuck up a creek without a paddle. Now, not only that, but Valve argued that it's similar to baseball cards, Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and other similar interests. Almost as if Valve is applying common sense here. I know, in this day and age, preposterous. Now, if you think Valve had enough this week, the FBI thinks otherwise, because they're seeking victim information in a Steam malware investigation. Yes, they are seeking to identify potential victims who installed one of these games: Blood Blasters, Chemia, or however you pronounced it, Dashverse, Dash FPS, Lampy, Lunara, Pirate Fi, and Tokenova. I'm not even sure how I pronounced those, if that was right, but yeah, regardless. The FBI also wants whoever installed one of these mentioned games to fill the short form because victims may be eligible for certain services, restitution, and rights under federal and or state law. Translation: if you live in the States and downloaded one of those games, you might want to have a look at what the FBI is basically bringing up here, considering those games had some malware shoved in them at a later date, and you might have a few issues there. That is, if you bothered installing them. Valve also shared other information this week, and this time it's not something that's tied to a lawsuit, thankfully. Steam users downloaded 100 exabytes of games in 2025 and are averaging at 274 petabytes of installs and updates every day. Now, to give you an idea how big this number is, 1 petabyte holds 1,000 terabytes, and 1 exabyte holds 1,000 petabytes. Yep, those numbers are huge. Not only that, but another way to look at it is that Steam handles about 190,000 gigabytes of data per minute. Let that sink in. Moving on, Chain Deco's developer is terminating the business relationship with FPG and is preparing a lawsuit for not delivering all physical versions. What's with this year, for crying out loud? We're having so many lawsuits, and it's only just the middle of March. Did I miss a memo or something? Anyways, Matthias Linde, the creator of the game, alleged that First Press Games only delivered the physical copies for the regular PlayStation 4 edition of the game, resulting in the termination of the business relationship with FPG. Now, obviously, for legal reasons, the creator cannot go further, but for the people who backed the game on Kickstarter for a physical copy, you have two options. 1. is to get a new physical edition by another publisher for the Kickstarter edition, or to get a refund for the edition. If you want a refund, you have to follow the steps provided by the creator. Oh brother, can we only wrap up the lawsuits in March already? This is gonna be annoying if the entire year turns into lawsuits. But anyways, moving on. Some of you may have already seen this coming, but Voto is fully released and the player count is ass. To give you an idea how bad this is, they have 14,000 followers on their X account, and on this post they have 2,300 likes, and yet they couldn't pass the 427 player mark for all-time players. Mind you, they claim to have reached, 250k wish lists? Now, I'll be honest, I was generous and I expected things to cap out at 800 to 1,000 players, but holy fuck, I overshot my estimate. Then again, I couldn't really expect much since some of the reviews like this one feel and read like something ChatGPT would spew out. My condolences to the poor AI circuits that had to write that down. I'll be honest, even AI doesn't deserve such a cruel fate. On the other hand, the Steam's general discussion for the game is quite literally the best thing that happened this week, because someone brought up the game reaching 250k wishlists, but less than 2% of them bought it. Ouch, that's gotta sting. Now, my favorite topic's got to be this one where Invalid Username points out that the forum has more users than the game itself. God damn, this community is cooking with gas. I'm having a blast! Waiter, another beer please. This is gonna be a fun weekend. And now for what looks like a one step forward, two steps back situation. Crimson Desert did a good thing, and they managed to make an optimized game. Yes, the game that allows you to punch a woman, which went viral on X twice. You would think that it's some kind of sin with how viral this clip went, but I mean, this is X we're talking about, so I'm not exactly shocked. Now, what do I mean by one step forward, two steps back? Well, they managed to fumble the ball by adding Denuvo 1 week before its release day. My take on this is probably, it's most likely not gonna affect sales that much. Then again, as with Voto's story, I could be horribly wrong. But what's certain is that it put off a few people and puts into question if the specs previously shown are gonna be up to par. Now, Paul Tassi did mention more info from Pearl Abyss about the benchmarks. They told him that the benchmark videos and performance specs they released were created with the exact same implementation of the Denuvo that is in the launch build. They also fumbled the physical release since you're required to update the game before even playing it in the first place. First fumbling physical releases, now this. What's the point of having a physical release in this day and age? I mean, I know the answer. It's to preserve the game. But I feel like everybody's trying to actively kill physical media at this point. Sound off in the comments if you feel that way as well. Another thing that's worth mentioning is that Digital Foundry got access to the game and did a deep dive into it for the PlayStation 5 Pro, so if you want more info on that build, go ahead and check out their video. Now, ultimately, my take on this whole Denuvo shit show is simple. Wait and see. If there are any issues with performance, you're gonna find out from your trusted reviewers. And I would recommend going through multiple reviews before pulling the trigger. Ultimately, this game isn't going anywhere, and you're not gonna be losing a whole lot by waiting a bit. And now, in other news, apparently there are AI-generated guidebooks flooding Amazon. Trash is found in a trash pile. More at 11. Alright, jokes aside. The first case is for Resident Evil Requiem, and some of the AI-written books were released before the game even came out. And, surprising no one, these quote-unquote books are unable to accurately give any guidance. Shocker, I know. It's all just hallucinated chatbot nonsense. Some of them even straight up stole screenshots from other game reviewers. The one on the left is a screenshot of Into Indie Games walkthrough, while the one on the right is the book. Coincidence? Fuck no. Now, FRVR also points out that Pragmata, a game that doesn't release until the 17th of April, also has an AI-generated game guide. The article even shows a list of AI-generated game guides they found just to emphasize the point that this slop is getting out of hand. Now, the journalist is hell frustrated, and I can understand why. I mean, it's literally just misinformation on top of misinformation on top of misinformation. But you know what? To quote him, no matter what you think about games journalism as a whole, a reputable website has played the game for a guide. A chatbot has not. Just like how an AI can't review a video game. These AI-generated game guides are a sign of where AI is actually heading. A website closed due to AI being the go-to for idiots, the feedback loop of AI content will essentially degrade into exactly what these game guides are. Oh boy. This dude is so frustrated he just called out the whole of X idiots, and I can't confirm that it was not on my bingo list for this week. Now, what was also not on my bingo list is PEGI adding 4 new categories in June this year to tackle elements of addictive design, unmonitored online communications, and loot boxes. Now, what that means is there's gonna be a reshuffle of what you get for PEGI 12, 16, 18, and so on. You get the idea. Now, the first criteria is in-app purchases. If a game contains time-limited or quantity-limited paid systems, like a paid battle pass where rewards disappear after a certain time, it will get a PEGI 12 rating. The Director General Dirk Bosemans told Eurogamer, "We obviously have much more details in the background, but we're not sharing that right now because we need to push this in practice to see how it works." It's also worth noting that any game related to the slop that is NFTs that are required to play is getting a PEGI 18 rating. The second criteria is paid random items, aka loot boxes, card pack systems, gacha, and even keys to unlock random items. If the game has any of those features, it will be PEGI 16. The rating will jump to PEGI 18 if it's a social casino game. I would be surprised if it didn't. The third criteria is play by appointment. This mainly covers daily streaks and or daily quests. The Director General elaborated further on this one. Some people pointed out that these are features that make the game engaging and fun. This is enriching the game experience similar to a cliffhanger in a Netflix series. So we mostly want to inform parents about this because there's no reason why we should give Animal Crossing a very high rating. So this is going to stick to a PEGI 7, but it will have a descriptor that explains this. The exact language of the descriptor still needs to be figured out. The game can also get a PEGI 12 rating from this criteria if it somehow punishes you if you don't return in time. Personally, I would have much rather have it at PEGI 16 rating. Let's be real, this is a dark pattern, forcing you to do daily logins, almost as if it's a gacha. I know. And the last criteria is online community. This one mainly targets games that do not have restricted communications, or in other words, no moderation. And if it's an unrestricted community, it automatically gets the PEGI 18. You know what? I'm just gonna wrap this up because this thing is a hot mess. And I personally would have structured things differently here. But anyways, to quote the director, if they wouldn't have any possibility to restrict text, voice or video or other chat, then that game would get an 18. That game also probably wouldn't be able to get a release on some platforms because they wouldn't allow this. And I would say specifically for the UK and the UK Online Safety Act, this game would be illegal for sale in the United Kingdom. So we don't expect to see many of those games. This is more like a line in the sand. We need to make it clear to companies that this is something you cannot do. Yeah. Now, why I have a problem with this? You're gonna allow loot boxes, which is about as close to gambling as it can get without gambling, under, what was it? PEGI 16? Yeah, it was PEGI 16. But if somebody doesn't restrict what you say online, that goes to PEGI 18. Yeah, this is ridiculous. Now, originally, here's a fun bit for you all. I kinda went insane reading this because of how Eurogamer wrote it. Let's put it like that. It wasn't exactly clear on what was meant to be said there. Thankfully, going to the PEGI website proved to be the smarter decision. And I found this thing here, which it clearly states, safe online gameplay. If games contain entirely unrestricted communication features, i.e. no blocking or reporting, they will be PEGI 18. Now, thank fuck, because I originally thought we were getting close to 1984 being a reality because of Eurogamer's piss poor wording. But still, if you don't have those features, which are, on the top of my head, I can think of almost every MMO that has them in one way, shape, or form, and every online game really has them in one way, shape, or form. If you don't have those, you're automatically slapped an 18 PEGI rating instead of, well, I don't know, thinly disguised online gambling in the form of loot boxes being slapped with an 18 PEGI rating. Yeah, common sense went out the window a while back. But anyways, thanks a bunch, Eurogamer. You're clearly not doing your job right if you're not driving me insane. Moving on, Dylan Cinder. Or at least that's how I hope it's pronounced, because for the love of God, help me with these weird names. A senior designer for Overwatch took to X to complain about people using marathons dropping players because he also doesn't have anything better to do apparently. To quote him exactly, is the 50% player drop in the room with us right now? Feel free to dislike and pass up any game you want, more power to you, but this is big unemployed maidenless behavior. There are so many things I can say right now, but YouTube isn't gonna like him. So, all I'm gonna say is, anyone associated with Overwatch, either by playing the game or working on it, shouldn't use maidenless behavior. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Rule 34 of the internet. Google that. Also, this is X, the last place you won't start an argument because of how big of a pile of shit that platform is. And why did he use a tweet that got only one like and one quote? Because apparently that's not unemployed behavior. Yeah, right. That's called being one-manned. Now, this kinda has me wondering, do Overwatch devs just spend time on X browsing for anyone disagreeing with their views just to start drama? Cause that's sure as shit what it looks like. Screw working on the game. Let's go on social media and start drama. Now, continuing with Overwatch, and specifically its co-creator, Jeff Kaplan, who also talked about his leave from Activision Blizzard. Now, this whole thing came in the form of a 5-hour-long podcast hosted by Lex Friedman. He talked about how Overwatch started to buckle when unreasonable expectations were placed on the Overwatch League, talking about how much excitement there was and how it got overmarked to the point where investors started to interfere with Overwatch itself. This included Twitch integration, spectator camera controls, and skins in the form of team uniforms. This led to, and to quote the man himself, and so all our plans for Overwatch content at that point kinda go out the window. You're not working on new world events, you're not focused on Overwatch 2, you're just treading water. That being followed up by even more pressure by investors. Yeesh! That doesn't sound like a good time now, does it? He even talked about his meeting with the CFO. And before I quote what he said, parts of that interview were censored. I have no idea why. They were talking about numbers, and I'm not sure if Jeff signed a non-disclosure agreement for those numbers or something. I'll be honest, I have no clue. So you're gonna hear redacted a couple of times, starting off with what he said, and I quote, "What ultimately broke me and my Blizzard career was I got called into the CFO's office, and he sits me down and he says, he gives me a date which at the time was 2020 and was going to slip to 2021. But at the time it was 2020, and he said, Overwatch has to make redacted in 2020, and then every year after that it needs a reoccurring revenue of redacted. And then he says to me, if it doesn't do redacted, we're going to lay off 1,000 people, and that's going to be on you." And that was the biggest fuck you moment I've had in my career. It felt surreal to be in that condition. Classic Blizzard. You get somebody who carries the whole team on his shoulders and didn't get anything in return. Just more demands from the higher ups. Oh, brother. Yeah, I can already smell why Blizzard went downhill. And to wrap things up with Blizzard, Rob Pardo, a former Blizzard vet, closed this year's GDC keynote by urging executives to cool it with the layoffs. To quote him, "To those of you who are executives or business leaders, I will leave you with one final thought. If you create a game that truly endures, it's incredibly difficult. And if you're fortunate enough to launch one of those games, the rewards can be extraordinary. But in my experience, if you build a game like that, you also build an incredible team. And personally, I think the game team is more valuable than the game itself." Alright, yeah, he's 100% correct on this one. The problem is, these types of games are like experiencing good British food. It only happens once in a millennia. He even emphasized that there's no guarantee that replacements will continue the legacy of the game. And yeah, he's right on that. I mean, this isn't just limited to games. It's in every form of media. I mean, you can pick up your favorite hobby, show that's still running, or like has something in that universe that's being made, and compare it to what it was previously when you joined. Odds are, there's gonna be a bit of a difference there. Now, for a follow-up from last week's video. Hooray! Literally the moment I uploaded last week's episode, I heard that Marathon prepared a patch to fix the microtransactions. Now, the TLDR is, they're gonna adjust the amount of currency you get for the $10 purchase to gain 1,120 lux. So basically, they're giving you an additional 120 lux for $10. Previously, it was just 1,100. A whole additional 20 lux instead of reducing skin prices. Yay! Such generosity. I mean, if they didn't do that, I'm pretty sure somebody in the EU, if they even played this game, is gonna have a field day in court. Then again, not a legal expert on this one. Just applying common sense with what I found from last week's video. And apparently another thing that I managed to miss is that the artist whose art was quote-unquote used for the game is now credited in the game properly. Now, Bungie also cancelled 2 GDC 2026 panels that were focused on Marathon. Now, for those who are curious, the first panel was on high-performance networking for gameplay, movement, and shooting, while the other one was on scaling automated testing for Destiny to support Marathon as a live service title. Now, Master of the TDS also posted on X about this, writing, "I'm hearing from a source on the GDC Expo floor that Bungie is scrambling right now to get things resolved, and the consensus around Marathon is the floor isn't great. Standing on stage, give that talk this week probably would have gone very badly." Alright, that kind of makes me curious. What's going on behind the curtain? Is there something that we're gonna be seeing next week from Marathon, or I don't know, an announcement or something? I don't know. But if it could have gone very badly, boy, that gets me thinking. And now to wrap up the week, a bunch of quickfire stories. The Until Dawn remake studio has been officially dissolved. No surprise there, since the remake didn't really offer anything new that was worthwhile. And I also want to point out how funny this is, since the article pointed out the remake launched with 28% fewer players on PlayStation 5 than Concord. How the hell do you do that is beyond me, but that just shows how little people wanted to play the remake. Additionally to that, Fortnite is increasing the price of V-Bucks starting the 19th of March. To be more specific, the price stays the same, but you're receiving less V-Bucks for the same price. Shrinkflation in action. The Battle Pass for that game is also reducing the amount of V-Bucks you get down to 800 to match the new pricing and awards. Ergo, you're only getting 800 for completing it. Now, is this Tim 2 Cent Sweeney desperately struggling for money or corporate greed? It's your call. Now, not to be left out of some shit shows and controversies, Sandfall Interactive's lawyers went on an offensive against a book with the name Académie Claire Obscure, and I most likely butchered that with a French accent. Why not? Or butchered the French accent. Either or maybe both. Now, regardless, they went on the offensive because it had Claire Obscure in the title. Thankfully, Sandfall Interactive reached out directly to Oliver, the man behind the book, to resolve this issue and reach a solution for everyone. Sandfall even posted publicly that they're working to withdraw from the lawsuit, and God, I hope all of this is correct, since this was auto-translated from French. Now, lastly, Legacy Games media site Video Gamer is completely removed from Google after pivoting to AI-generated articles. Yes, that's the same website that's responsible for posting an AI-generated review of Resident Evil Requiem. Now, to be more specific, what Google did is they de-indexed the website, meaning you can't use Google's search engine to find it. You have to manually type in the URL. God, even Google doesn't want to deal with that shit. And if only those books from earlier could disappear in the exact same way that site did. But anyways, that's all for this week. You know the drill. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you next week.